Let's get, yeah, this is May 21st. This is the OSS demo for the week. Here's Nate.
So this week I've been working on, or at least for a good chunk of the week, half the week I've been working on the C++ API. And so in my console over here, I just created a random set of tables just to kind of like put a bunch of stuff in the query scope. So this also intersects some of the code reviews that I've been having with Ryan. And obviously I've got this guy running on the side, but I made a small C++ program that hits the flight API and lists all of the flight descriptors that are currently being exposed. So this is a good first baby step towards having a C++ API that's on top of the gRPC API. And that's what I have to demo.
And so you have list flights working with scopes now, and scope tickets working now.
Exactly.
Excellent, excellent.
And as long as we are recording, what's the next step you're hoping to produce?
Yeah, so the next step here is actually to create the code on the client, on the C++ client, to manage a session. So actually being able to send this script that I put on via the UI, I could send it through the C++ code. That's probably a good next step. That idea. That's like the next thing.
Excellent. Does anyone need Nate to expand, or can we move on? Good stuff, Nate. Thanks.
All right, Jiangfeng.
Sorry, I'm having trouble sharing my screen. I think, Devin, you can go next. Try to fix it.
Okay. Devin, you're muted, but...
Sure. All right, I've got two things to demo here, hopefully pretty quick. Let's go over to here. So this is the Javadocs. Is everybody able to see them?
Mm-hmm.
So you can navigate through them like you might expect. But the new thing here is we've enabled search for the OSS side of things. So you can go ahead and type and click on stuff. And so that's that demo.
Is that merged yet, or is it just about to be?
That is in review right now. Got an assist from James on that, and I'm hoping to have it merged any time. So that's nice. And then now I'll show a little... it's kind of a combination, or it's part of what I eventually consider the query syntax tree, but it's how to construct a new table, or improve the new table API, and imagining what that might look like. Let me share my screen here, and I'm gonna do it through some demos that kind of expand kind of in scope in what we might do with them. Can everybody see the screen? So this is kind of the same layout that you're expecting to see when you do table tools dot new table. Some of the names here have changed. In the future, these can be incorporated into the table tools or whatever. But the idea here is saying you've got a new table and it's composed of columns, and those columns have names and then values. The one difference you might notice here, though, is I'm making some decisions here to use null values as opposed to null int. And so that makes the end user experience a little bit more consistent with Java. And then you can use nulls, obviously, with strings too. And so this is kind of what you're used to when you create a new table. Let's scroll down to the next time. So here's an expansion on that idea. Let's try to take this column-oriented version, which is kind of hard. So if I asked, what is Robin's department ID? I have to count 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, he's 34. What's his telephone number? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it's that. If we've got a kind of row-oriented version, which people are really used to working with, like in CSVs or whatever, what is Robin's info? Bam. It's all right there on the same line. He's department 34, and that's his telephone number right here. The interesting thing about this also is it's strongly typed. So if I accidentally put a string in Robin's department ID, it's going to give me a type error here. It's going to say he needs a integer for department ID, not a string. Correspondingly, if we get rid of one of these headers, we're going to see, it's two wide now instead of 3 wide. And so I'm using the Java type system in an interesting way to be able to get some strongly typed kind of row-oriented builders right here. So this is some of the stuff that I'm hoping to reimagine when we approach a QST. There was an interesting point that was made in our QST meeting about the difference of needs between the REPL experience and the IDE experience. I think this is really nice for the IDE experience specifically, but also for the REPL once you have some of these nice autocomplete features in the IDE. So let's expand it a little bit further. So let's say we want to make some generic stuff. You can pull out some of these headers to reuse in other places. Oh, and just before I say, this example is basically pulled from some of our documentation, so you can compare it if you want to see how it's done there. But let's say we want to pull out the column headers because we want to reuse some of these fields. And so we got an employee header, and then we got a department header. And so we've got the same example that we built up earlier, but now you can just give it an employee header instead of having to specify all the headers out each time. So here's, 2 new employees, Fu and Bar, and they're, both using the same header that you defined earlier. And then here's the department header with the department fields, and you notice they're in a different order than the other ones. And then finally, I just want to give a slightly more strongly typed example of what something might look if somebody wanted to take these constructs and actually use their own Java types in it. You'd kind of have the same structure. The implementations of these APIs are out of scope, but the idea would be you could pass in an array of employees, use this kind of builder pattern explicitly to build up the stuff to get a new table out. And so then it would look something like this, or, the departments would look something like that. So that's kind of how I imagine a new interface around new table might look.
Okay, I guess the only question I have is if you go up to the very first example.
Sure, I lost my screen here. Yep.
Yeah, so if you look at our current interface, we have a column function, but we discourage its use and
Sure.
encourage string column or int column or
Sure.
whatever.
Yep.
What are you doing to be careful about the types here?
Yeah, so the types here are based off of these values. We can be more explicit here. I don't remember if I was doing it in column dot. So what we could do here is we could, column dot event. I also have string column. No, I was doing it differently down here. Yeah, so for the header itself, you can do event or of string. I didn't expose that directly on column because a column is slightly different than a column header. But this is not like a final form. I'd say it can be.
Show Chip what those methods are, though, what the signatures of those methods, and then he'll see a little bit why it's type safe.
Of these, oh yeah, sure. So, it kind of looks like this right here.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, but the column is is the box type.
Yes. Well, it'll be converted obviously when it becomes Deephaven data, right, or table data.
Okay.
So I think this is about having a syntax that's nicer to use for the user. You wouldn't want to use this for anything particularly large. It's more for, hey, look, I'm going to be typing at a screen. How can I best do this, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think we still may have a user circumstance where somebody has done, let's say, something in Python. They have a long array of something and want to cram it in.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful.
I'm sure
about
it's
that
working
case
too.
as well.
For sure. And there's an interesting. There is a battle between making things easy and quick enough in a REPL versus explicit enough when you're wanting to construct a declarative object potentially. So I think there's a lot of concerns like that the DevRel folks are going to need to eventually advise on or say this is kind of funky, kind of like that question that you just asked.
But I am pretty confident that we can support arrays of primitives and arrays of box primitives, right? Just you can let people do either, frankly, right? Either way, I'm just very sold on the sort of the type safe row oriented interface there, right? I think that's just basically glorious. So,
Nice. That'll be good for ad hoc tables for sure.
that's what it is.
All right. I think
Exactly.
JJ was up next.
All right. So you guys can hear me, right?
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
Great.
I mean, let's just give a moment here and say how impressed we are that JJ first week on already in the demo world. Pretty good.
Trial by fire. Okay.
Nailed it.
That's the full Pete Goddard right
Yeah.
there.
They don't call me Gooch for nothing.
All right. All right. So we're
They call you that? That was new to me.
JJ.
You think you just want to see a
Try-
again?
Trial by fire, and I failed miserably. No, in order to share my screen, Google Chrome decided it needed to quit and reopen. So I lost a few tabs, but that's all
That's
right.
exactly what happened to me, so don't feel
Yeah.
bad.
Okay, so all right, let's see.
If you need to set back, oh, you're good. Okay.
Okay, so basically, I'm going to be demoing the Mike Blazak's example scripts and data that Ryan touched on very briefly earlier. He mentioned that there's 3 data sets in there. The repo is available in the Deephaven on the Deephaven GitHub. It's called examples. It's like I said, it's got 3 data sets. One is the global summary of the day, which is weather data. The other is the Iris data set that is commonly used for basic machine learning. And the third is a Century bike ride that Mike did where he recorded a bunch of his own stuff. This repo, I have my own branch that I'm going to be asking for some review from Chip soon to update this README with installation instructions. And that's kind of what I'm going to go over here, is showing that it's pretty easy to download this stuff into your Deephaven core repo clone, and then check the data out in the OSS product. So here I have in my command line my Deephaven core installation installed, and so normally data would go in Docker core data. But we don't have anything there right now. So in order to install the data from the examples repo, all you need to do is build a Docker image and then load the Docker image with the data and put it in the right spot. And that's done with 2 commands. And this is, again, going to be included in the README update that I'm hoping to get a review, or rather a couple of final changes so that it can be reviewed and pushed out there. So basically all you do is you build the Docker image. So we're going to pull from the Deephaven examples and call it sample.
You spelled examples wrong.
I did.
You went Canadian with the X Maple.
I didn't try to go Canadian. I missed something here.
Do you have the right repo checked out?
I do. Oh, no, I don't. I don't. I did this earlier, and I forgot to do it again. So I have my own here. And so we can, so in here we can see I actually have the proper repo or the proper branch pulled down on the pull request. So the Deephaven examples, samples. Okay, so you get some messages, and then it's only one other command, and that's where you actually run Docker. And so this is where you stick it in the right spot. So Docker core data, and then /data, and then I need close quotes. And so it's going to complain and throw some errors. Basically, it's because there hasn't been an issue tag to it, but it's still in there. And so we can actually check that the examples folder is in there, and we can make sure that all the data we expect is in there. And so we can see a README and then 3 directories that contain stuff. So after that, we can come into the OSS product, and then we can import from CSV, and we can just read one into the actual product itself. And so we'll say iris equals read CSV and give it a file path. And you'll see that the table populates, and then you can do whatever you want to with it. So that's about it.
Nice.
Sorry for sharing my screen and quitting and then unchecking out the right branch and forgetting to recheck it out before this thing. So
That's fine. So that'll be really handy for distributing examples in an easy-to-use fashion. That'll be cool.
yeah, and so the README will be updated shortly with instructions on how to do that for anybody who wants to try it and ends up landing in the examples repo.
All right, cool. Let's hop back to Jiangfeng.
Okay, and let's hope my stuff works now.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to reinstall macOS earlier this week, and now I lost the permission. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so this week, Darren and I, we pretty much wrapped up putting his, changes for the Numba integration a year ago to OSS. So we cooked up just a simple program to demonstrate the performance difference between 3 ways of doing the same query. So the query would be, you just create a, I think, let's see. We're going to create a meaning row table, and we will then create 2 columns, and eventually we will do a sum by. So there are 3 ways of doing this. The first way is with the Numba vectorized function. So currently this syntax is pretty clunky, explicit, but we're going to improve that. The second way is just to use the plain Python function. The third way, we just let the Deephaven engine, do the computation. So we're going to run it the first time. So the first time we run it, the difference is not that significant because they all have some upfront cost of compiling, all that. But if I run it the second time, you can see that the number case we improved pretty significantly, and it's like 30 times faster than the regular Python function. And of course, the Deephaven way is always faster because we are just doing it inside the JVM.
It's actually not always faster, but that's
yeah, only for this case, yeah. We use the silly kind of computation. Yeah. Usually, you wouldn't do that. You would probably doing some really complicated math functions in with the Python number function. So yeah,
this is beautiful.
So does that get around our guild problems for multi-threading as well?
I think the default mode is CPU. We haven't tried the parallel mode. Yeah. Any questions?
Nope. I think that's everybody that had a demo this week, right? All right.
I believe so.
All right. Rock on. See you next week.